Hey guys, Marmalade here with Marmalade Outdoors. How's it going, everybody? I'm excited about doing another series of Q&As. Periodically, I get asked a lot of questions, and most of the time I just write back. But I thought it'd be fun to do some more Q&As. So at the end, I'll also ask again. But if you have some questions, please ask. Please ask. It could be about like through hiking or the mental, emotional side of hiking, gear, food, travel, um, navigation, things like it could be anything. You know how I got to trails, how I got off trails, things like that. Because there's a lot of logistics that people stress over, and it kind of mires their experience, or at least getting started on a hike, whether it's a through hike or a section or the JMT or something like that. So feel free to ask questions in the description box below. But let's get started. I have 4 questions today. The first one is from a friend of mine, Eric Dryfly, and he asks, Mike, on your journey that started today in 2019, he meant on the same date. When he wrote this, it was the same date, March 26th, but in 2019. What gear from the past stood the test of time, and what gear do you remember being a total bust? So I wrote down some notes to myself. I only had one piece of gear, and I kind of mentioned it if you watched all my videos on trail, but you probably didn't because there were so many of them. But the only piece of gear I had that made it all the way is this Thermarest Z-Seat accordion butt pad. That's the only thing that made it, and it's thrashed. I had this, I bet you, 2 years before I even started the PCT, and then 5 years on the PCT, and all my section hikes in between those years. So this is probably done 5,000 to 6,000 miles. I don't know. It still works. I have a new one. It's a different brand. It's kind of neat that I actually won in a raffle. So I'm going to start using because it's just a new clean one. But this is the only thing that made it. And if you remember, if you did watch every video, I lost this on a 5-day stretch, a really long, like 120-mile section, and I lost it in the middle of it going to Etna in Northern California, and it was good as gone. I set it down and then took a break before I got on my tent that night and forgot that it was on a rock, and I left it. And I did a video on it, but basically I wrote it off, and I was bummed because it was the last piece of gear I had from the start. And got to Etna and stayed in a hostel. And a lady that came in, we were just small talking, and I had written it off. Actually, forgot about it. She talked about something she lost, and I go, "Yeah, I feel it. I feel your pain. I lost my last thing I left on the PCT." She goes, "What was it?" I said, "It's just a Z-Seat butt pad." And she goes, "Is this it?" And she actually found it, and I lost it in a crazy hard find place, and she found it. But she carried it all the way. She goes, "I hope you don't mind I use it." I go, "Well, you carried it. You could use it as much as you want." So that's my story. But it's kind of cool that this is the last piece I had, and I actually lost it. So. That's great. When you talk about some gear that was a bust, you have a lot when you put that much abuse on gear. Some of it doesn't mean that it's bad gear; it's just some failure. But I had 3 things that just came to mind right away. I'm sure there's more. The first one was what the tent I started with. It's a great product that I bought it used, but they make a great tent, but it didn't work for me. I fit in it, but I did the desert section in the Big Agnes Tiger Wall UL2. So 2-person tent. It's the yellow one. And if I have a picture, I'll show you one here somewhere. But I bought it used from somebody who takes care of their gear. It was in great shape. But what I didn't realize is when I went to the desert section, it's 702 miles. It only sprinkled like 2 or 3 times that night and never rained hard. So the tent never got really tested. And even then, the tent soaked up water pretty good. And you know, the rain fly is supposed to be pretty resilient, but I think because of just being a little bit older tent, like I think it needed to be resealed or resprayed with waterproofness, but I didn't know that. It's a brand new tent. It was in phenomenal shape, so I just used it. I also had a ground sheet underneath that matched with my set, and that had been previously sprayed for waterproofing. And so I thought it was good. But what happened was I did the desert, and then that year, if you remember, 19 was also a big snowy year like last year. I came home, waited 6 weeks, flipped up to like Seattle area, got a hitch up to Harts Pass, started, and when I came down, I started the last day of June on the northern terminus and was going to do the rest of the trail south and end in the Sierras, hopefully so the snow is melted. Well, even though it was summer, it rained almost every single day and most nights, and my tent just absorbed water like a sponge, like ridiculously. It was coming up through the ground sheet, through the bottom of the tent, through the rain fly, through the sides, and it was almost comical. I was on a little thicker air mattress back then, like a 3 or 4 inch thick one, and I was on my air mattress, and it was almost like I was in a boat. Everything in my tent, I wasn't underwater, but everything was soaked. So I think I carry a little Tyvek ground like doormat. I have a little piece of Tyvek I can put outside my door for my muddy shoes and stuff. So that's synthetic and waterproof. So I put that in my tent. So I had to protect my electronics and things that I couldn't get wet in my tent from my tent, and that's how bad it was. So I hadn't been in the water conditions until that point, and I realized that I should have. I didn't know it at the time, but I should have re-sprayed it with waterproofness to make it. So that's actually the big reason why I use DCF tents from Z-Packs and other people now, because when I was on trail and my tent was not performing, it was soaking water up. Everybody that had a DCF tent, and back then in 19, it was mostly just Z-Packs, they were bone dry. So I just decided from then on, it's light. I already carry trekking poles, so I can use that. And I'm just going to carry DCF from then on. So I saved up and got one. Oh, and there was one other thing that happened with that tent. When I got to Hiker Town, which is the start of the walking in the Mojave Desert and the LA Aqueduct, you walk on the LA Aqueduct. When I got there, my tent poles, it's a pole tent then, my Tiger Wall UL2, the pole broke, and it took me about, I had to communicate while I was on trail somehow with Big Agnes, and they eventually sent me a replacement pole like 3 towns ahead, and when I eventually got it, I had to restring my whole tent, but it eventually worked. But yeah, it was a pain. So like the tent pole broke on that tent, and the water was coming through, so I forgot about that. Another one, which was a failure, and remember, everything I'm giving you when I tell you the answers to these things, these are my experiences. I'm not the all-knowing or think that I know everything. I'm giving you when it's the best or the worst or the things I liked or disliked. This is my experience and what I prefer. So just take that into consideration when I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do. But the other thing that didn't work for me was I chose last year when I had that last 963 miles to do. I chose to, because I really wanted to go light. I had a lot of really tough backpacking to do, a lot of steep, big mountains, so I wanted to go as light as possible. So I ended up cold soaking, which means, you don't cook, because I didn't bring my stove. I did wraps with meat and cheese and stuff like that, and I brought a Talenti jar to cold soak food. All my cold soaking food tasted horrible, and one of the mistakes I made was not testing that food out before I left. I was just too busy and didn't take the time, and I should have. But because of that, I did hike really long and hard. I had a lot of difficulty. I went through 2 heat waves, but I lost 50 pounds in 2 months. Partly because of the effort I was putting out on trail, but a lot because I couldn't eat. There's times I would cold soak ramen, and I love ramen when it's cooked. It tasted horrible cold soak to me. And I couldn't wolf it down. I ended up having like a bar for dinner. So like there's times when I didn't really eat much, if anything, at dinner, because I only had to kind of spread out my food for the section I was in, and I only had so much food. So there's times when I went to bed kind of hungry. So unless something changes or something in our, the food that we carry that cold soaks better, something I'm never going to cold soak again. I think it's worth the stove, and it's a nice reward to have a hot meal every night in the tent. And the third thing of things that failed that I can remember, I know I had a lot more, was this last year also, besides the cold soaking, I had a solar panel I've had forever, and it's kind of intermittently worked, but I brought it on the trail. It was fairly light, but it seemed to hardly ever. I carry a couple exterior batteries, and because I had really long stretches between towns where I could charge up my batteries, I wanted to top off my batteries. So the theory was to put my solar panel on top, plug one of my batteries into it, and stuff it in one of my backpack pockets, and just let it charge during the day when I'm hiking. And it worked okay, but I found that at the end of the day, especially if it was kind of partly cloudy, it didn't really charge much. So I was carrying about 7 or 8 ounces that didn't really work much. And then after about, I don't even remember anymore, a couple weeks or something, it broke. I don't know if I brushed it up against some branches or something, but it broke it, so it didn't work. And I ended up chucking it, and I ended up just having to buy, that was 7 or 8 ounces for the solar panel. I ended up just ordering on Amazon a third 10,000 milliamp battery that was about 6 ounces, and sent it to myself ahead on trail, and I just carried that. So I had 3 batteries, so I never had a chance of running out after that, and I ended up saving about 2 ounces. But yeah, those are 3 things that came to mind that just didn't work out for me personally. Other people, like solar panels, work perfectly, but for me so far it hasn't. I have a new one actually that I'll show you later on that's really light that I'm trying out, so I haven't given up on it, but the old one I had just seemed to never work. So thanks for those questions, Eric. All right, number 2 is from somebody that I hear from all the time, and I appreciate it, is Richard in Japan 4578. Hello, Marmalade. You stated you started your PCT Odyssey as a through hike. Then, due to circumstances beyond your control, your venture morphed into a series of lashes, which stand for long-ass section hikes, over multiple years. Likewise, I would like to hike the PCT as a series of lashes. For someone contemplating attempting the trail in segments, what kind of strategy might you recommend in terms of best order to undertake the segment so as to experience hikers? so as the experienced hikers can gently work their way through the easier segments first, culminating in the most challenging segments later. So he's saying basically, what are the a little more doable, easier sections of the trail to get your trail legs and just get your experience and get more, like I felt like, I took 5 years to do trail, and I felt like every year I was stronger and smarter and more accomplished and mentally tougher. So I think that's what he's referring to. And so I thought about it and I broke it into 5 sections. Now remember, I'm different than everybody else. I'm just giving you my perspective and what I think. Like if I was going to do the trail as a beginner and I knew what I knew, and so the first section, everybody says, but Oregon, in relativity to the other sections, is the least steep. It still has big mountains and stuff, but there's more flat and cruisy areas. But so Oregon, I would start with Oregon. I put the desert section next. I love, I live in San Diego. I'm right by Section A. I've done it, I don't even know, in pieces and parts or whole 20 times. And I feel like Section A, which is the first 109.5 miles from Campo to Warner Springs, is one of the easier sections you'll have on the whole PCT. And I think it's a great start when people are doing the whole trail because it just gets you weaned into it. Section B, which goes through Idlewild and all that, is maybe one of the hardest sections, if not the hardest section in the desert. But at least you've got the 150 miles on you, or 100 miles before you, 110 before you start Section B. But I would say do the desert or portions of the desert next. And then I put probably the next 3 to me are all tough. And I did 560 miles this last year to finish, start of the finish at Northern Cal. It was very difficult, but I would say NorCal is third. Then I would do maybe the Sierras fourth. And last is the Cascade Mountain Range in Washington. I finished the lower, it's like 500 miles or so. I finished the lower 313 to finish my hike. But when you start in Cascade Locks, it's not any harder than maybe Northern California, but it progressively gets steeper and rougher and tougher. And I think a lot of times when people do a whole through hike, it's also very tough because it's very difficult hiking, but it's also at the end of your hike and you're pretty much worn out and you're mentally beat and physically beat. So I think it's partly that. So if you're fresh and you started a section one year, it wouldn't be so tough on you. But I feel like the Cascades, the more north you get, the closer to Canada you get, the tougher and steeper and rougher it gets. So that would be my recommendation, Richard. All right, question 3 of the 4 is from D Fritz 8513, and it's kind of an interesting question. He actually asked me about 10 questions, so if you guys write me questions, ask a whole bunch. I'm going to answer 3 of them now. They're all kind of easy to answer ones, but he asked me a bunch. So D Fritz, I'll be answering more of yours in other videos. So the first one is water filtering a thing, or do people just use it from time to time? In other words, he's asking, do you always water filter, or you just do it here and there? I always water filter. Now there's water sources out of somebody's faucet or their sink or their hose, it's okay. But on trail, I don't take chances. Now when you're in the Sierra, in certain places, the water is literally coming from a spring. It's coming right out of the mountain, but you can risk Giardia. It's a very little chance. But when you're out in the wilderness, this water is the best water you ever drink in your life. But you can risk getting Giardia if an animal has gone to the bathroom in the water. So I filter everything I possibly can, no matter how look good it looks, unless I know the water source is like I said, a filtered or a fountain or a faucet or something like that. All right, the second of the 3 questions he had that I'm going to answer today is, do many hikers pack a weapon? I'm going to say no. There's a lot of talk of that. When I first was before my very first year, when my friends that don't know anything about the trail, like, are you bringing a gun? I'm like, well, first of all, I don't own a gun. I'm not a gun person. I don't want to shoot anything. And so I would say no. Have people probably brought a gun? Yes. But you have to think about it. When you're walking down the trail, if something just attacks you, how are you going to, unless you have an Old West style on a holster ready to pull out a gun, you can't say, hold on a minute, I'm going to pull this big shotgun out of my backpack. Plus, weapons are heavy. So that's probably a no. I have seen early in the trail on some years when I've done from the very start of the trail at the Mexican border, I've done like the first 20, 30 miles or whatever. I've seen big giant Bowie knives. So I think people start with them. And then when they actually physically have to carry it all, they realize, I don't want to carry this thing. So the answer is no. And what I did to kind of protect myself was, I know if something attacks you, there's nothing you can do about it, right? But I decided there's really only 3 animals that can really hurt you or kill you, and that's rattlesnakes in the desert, sometimes bear and mountain lion in the desert, but mountain lions and bear the rest of the way. So what I did was, I'm around rattlesnakes all the time, so I know how to act towards them, but I had never seen a bear until my hike, and I still haven't seen a mountain lion. But I decided I'm going to study how to act towards them, how they act, and what triggers them to attack you or not. So what I've tried to do is I can't, if one wants to eat me, that's what they do. But I decided I want to protect myself the best I can by knowing what to do if that situation were to occur. So that's what I've done. So, and the third one is an interesting one that kind of I relate to. It says, "What are your thoughts on hiking clubs for singles?" So, when I started in 2016, I actually signed up in 15 for there's an app called Meetup. It's free, and it has a million different kinds of groups. If you hike, if you paint, you do photography. They have singles clubs. They have everything known to man, and people start groups. And so, like, I started just day hiking in 2015, and I did my first backpacking trip on January 2016. But that's how I got started hiking. I never ended up dating anybody from the groups. I have friends that are now married that met on a dating site, but it can happen. But that's a good way, whether you're looking, if you're single and you're looking to meet somebody, but also that's how I got initiated into hiking. I had never hiked. I had no idea where to go, so I started day hiking, and it was a little awkward at first because they seemed like they all knew each other when I go to a hike, but everybody was very friendly and welcoming, and I learned like how to hike eventually, and got better at it. And I felt like part of the group as time went on by. And then I joined a couple of beginner backpacking groups, and that's how I got it. And then I eventually joined a PCT section hiking group for Southern California. And that's how I went from 0 to 100 backpacking. I went from not owning anything or ever doing it to falling in love with it, even though I was horrible at it, and just practice and practice. And then I stopped going to groups as a single person and started, once I felt a little bit, in retrospect, I probably didn't know what the heck I was doing, but once I did a few trips, then I started going out by myself because I like to go at my own pace. I like to video and make videos of my hikes, and I felt like, I didn't want to be dictated by other people in the group, and I also didn't want to affect other people's hikes. So that's why a lot of times I go by myself, because I can be more creative with my videos, and I'm not affecting somebody's hike where they have to stop while I'm filming and all that. So anyway, those are 3 good questions, and you have a lot more that I'll answer, I promise, but thanks for those very much. All right, number 4 for this video is Cheryl the Horse Chick, and she's written me before. Thank you, Cheryl. She writes, "How do you plan your day on trail? Do you look at the GPS for water and campsites, or just walk and look later?" So it's a little different, but I'll go like PCT. Like if you're gonna go out and do a backpacking trip, if it's a new section, I'll study the section on Far Out if I have it. I also use Gaia sometimes if I don't have Far Out. But with Far Out, it tells you water. So, but on the PCT this year, I would only look at, so let's pretend like I'm hiking today. At the end of my day, before I plan tomorrow, I have to plan, okay, if I'm dry camping where I don't have any water, if I'm at a stream right now, and I know, let's say I have 5 miles to camp. I'm going to get water for the next 5 miles for dinner. And then I look, so how I plan tomorrow is, before tomorrow, I just look and see where the next water is, because I need to carry enough water. Let's say it's 5 miles to camp. I need 5 miles of water. I need water for a dinner and sipping on at night in my tent. And then let's say it's not 5 more miles before the next water tomorrow, then I'll get enough water for that too. That way, when I leave now, I have enough water to get to the next water. And then what happens is when I get to camp tonight, I look at tomorrow and I pull up my Far Out app, and I'm not super strict about it, but I want to look at 2 things, a couple things. I look at my elevation for the day. So on the Far Out app, you have a topo looking straight down at it, and you have like horizontal looking at the elevation. So I want to look and see, is it, because when you're planning, if you want to do 10 miles, 15, 30, whatever you're doing, you need to see, well, how much climb is in there, because that's probably going to slow you down and be more difficult. So you may not get as far that you might get on a flatter day. So I look at the elevation, and so I look at how my day is going, and that tells me whether it's going to be a tough day. And that, if I think I can only do 22 because it's a lot of climb, then that's what my day is like. If it looks really cruisy and not too hard, I'll look further down the trail. And what I try to do, not always, I do a couple things. I'll look for a early, middle, and a long campsite. So just roughly, well, if I'm not feeling it, or I'm making poor progress, or I'm tired, I'll stop at the early one. If I'm doing all right, I'll get to the middle. And if I get there and I still got an hour of good hiking light, I might go further to the far one. So I kind of look roughly at where I'm going to camp. The thing with the app, the Far Out app, is there's just as many campsites on the trail as they actually show. So like if you see all the campsites on the app, there's twice as many. There's just that many that they don't show. So the hikers have made a lot of campsites. So there's times when I'll get to the last campsite on my app and I want to go a little further, I'll just go, and I end up finding one like that. The other thing I do, and I used to do this all the time, and when I was with the Codders, they did this too, so it just felt natural. It's what I do, is sometimes for my day, I'll look for, like, if I'm going to do, let's pretend I'm going to do 25 miles. I'll look for, I might need water in a couple miles, but I'll look for a halfway point for lunch. And also, like what we did together, and when I'm by myself, I do the same thing. But I'll look to say I find water at 12 miles for the day. That'll be our goal. So like when we hike together, we get spread out. So we say, hey, if we get spread out 12 miles, we're all meeting for lunch. And even when I'm by myself, I do that. And it just, I like to kind of set smaller goals to get to the big goal. It's kind of hard when it's kind of overwhelming when um, you try to do a really big day and you're only 3 miles in and it's a lot of climbing. You're slow. You're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do 25? So I break my day up into parts: water, break spots, and then eventually I'm like, okay, now I'm past halfway. And then I always have a joke that I've told my friends sometimes is at the end of every day I try to get to only 3 miles left and 1 mile left, because when you hike a lot of miles, 3 miles doesn't seem like much. So I all day when I'm hiking, I try to get to only 3 miles left. And then once I get to that 3 miles in, my last goal is to just get to where I only have 1 mile left. And 1 mile will flash by in 15, 20 minutes. So I have these little baby goals. And not only should you do your daily goals that way, but when you do the whole trail or a whole JMT or whatever you do, break your thing. Don't worry about the end. It'll come. Just break it into small things, whether it's daily things or I just want to get to the next resupply. So that is your answer. Okay, that was a good series of questions. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if that was a little bit long, but we had 3 questions in one there. But please, I'm looking for more questions. So ask them in the description box below or the post I made on the community tab on my YouTube channel here. But that's it for now. Thanks for listening. I'm going to get out of here now. I'm actually dying to eat something. I'm going to go get a burger or something. So I'll see you next time or see you down the trail.